welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm John BACHMAN. Joining us now from our studio in New York City is former Navy SEAL Brandon Webb. He is also the editor-in-chief for a website called softrep.com. And Brandon, before we get started, I just want to thank you and the rest of our servicemen and women out there for helping us out in a big way, of course, in defending our nation and our freedom.
Yeah, no, thank you for the support. It does matter.
All right, so there's a lot to talk about this week in Congress, both in the Senate and the House. There are expected to be hearings about the attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi. I know this, of course, is a personal issue for you, considering you lost your best friend, Glenn Doherty, a fellow SEAL, during the attack. What do you hope that the American people learn as a result of this, and where do you think this tragedy is going?
Well, I just hope that the truth comes out and that people start taking responsibility. That was a big disappointment to me personally, to see everything happen in the media with Benghazi, and everyone's ducking for cover politically and not really coming out and taking responsibility. I mean, these things do happen. It's a part of the job. I personally think that there was no purposeful effort to not give aid. I think that these guys did the best job, in this case the CIA, in rescuing those State Department personnel and getting over 30 people out of there safely. I mean, with relatively low casualties. The problem that I have is people just not owning up and taking responsibility for what happened over there, and say, look, bad things happen. What do we got to do? What went wrong, and what do we have to do to make sure this thing doesn't happen again? And all I'm seeing is people running for cover.
Was it the president that you were most disappointed with?
I don't think the president. I think he has, he's got a tough job. He's got Secretary Clinton underneath him. It's her responsibility for the Department of State. I think she hasn't taken, as waiting almost a month after this situation happens before she takes responsibility is unsat, in my point of view. And I think and it looks like she's not really going to be taking a heavily participating in these hearings, which is a disappointment. So I would say most of my blame falls on her for just not coming right out and owning the situation.
And you talked about this, of course. It became a very political issue, especially right before the election. What did you think about the way some of the president's critics used this to try and, I want to be careful how I say this, but they use this in a way that could have affected the election?
Yeah, I think it was an all-time low in the conservative media. I myself was drug into the mix. I had people attaching my name to stuff that I had nothing to do with, like blogs and saying I wrote personal firsthand accounts, and it just wasn't so. I don't fault the president or the Department of Defense for how they handled the situation. It just is what it is. Libya is a dangerous place, and all those guys knew that, including Glenn Doherty, one of my closest friends. We talked about it before he went over there for a second time. When you have a three-letter agency that goes to the aid of the Department of State, these agencies by nature, they don't work closely with the Department of Defense in certain matters where it comes down to operational security. So there's going to be that delay, and I think we're talking 7 hours. The CIA did an amazing job with very little or no assets to go rescue those State Department personnel and get them out of there safely.
And when you hear people say that Governor Mitt Romney should have used Benghazi more and should have been more aggressive towards the president with Benghazi before the election took place, what do you think about the folks that are saying that?
I think that they were probably about as aggressive as I've seen. I mean, I don't see how they could have been more aggressive, trying to spin it as if there was a purposeful campaign to not give aid for Benghazi, which I find still just absolutely ridiculous.
And of course, people are now, getting this information about CIA director, former CIA director, now David Petraeus, also former four-star Army general. His affair has been uncovered. What do you think the impact will be from losing Petraeus on the CIA and the efforts that coordinate between the CIA and the U.S. military?
Well, I think it's a huge loss. I'll come out and say General Petraeus he's an American hero and a patriot. People make mistakes. He obviously, had a lack of judgment there with the affair, but that happens all over the United States if you look at it. And I think it's really tragic that we're losing one of the country's greatest leaders. And I know a lot of people were actually hopeful that he would make a run next campaign season for president.
That is one thing that everybody seems to agree on. This will be a huge loss for security abroad and at home. There were a lot of people who were also quick to point to some sort of conspiracy, saying that the affair and resignation may have all been part of a bigger cover-up on Benghazi. Based on new information, that seems very unlikely at this point. But based on your knowledge of what's going on in Libya, do you think that there is any evidence of a cover-up in Benghazi?
I honestly don't think so. I think it's more of an accountability issue. Like I said earlier, I think people they need to get all the cards on the table, and people need to own up for just the lack of security posture in Benghazi. I don't think there's any cover up or any of that. I think that those folks did the best they could with what they had, and that all my friends in the military, and I've talked to guys on the ground that were in Benghazi. None of those guys said that they had any lack of support. It just was a tough situation, and they did the best they could.
And I know you would know better than most. In terms of the fallout of this Petraeus affair, there are also reports now that the CIA was working in Libya to funnel weapons to Syrian fighters there fighting the Assad regime. If these reports are in fact true, what do you make of that strategy?
Well, I mean, personally, that's what the CIA does all over the world. I mean, it's no secret what the CIA is doing. All sorts of bad places in the world. But my issue is we need a clear foreign policy strategy. And right now, I don't think we have one. I think we're stretched way too thin all over the place. The Middle East is erupting in chaos all over the place. Syria, you have Egypt, Libya, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan still unfinished. I mean, it's just so much that we really need a clear, focused strategy. And I think we're stretched too thin as a nation. Our troops are over a decade at war. Special operations forces are worn out. We need to kind of pull in and regroup. And really, I hope I see this from the administration, is that they really develop a clear-cut strategy and use the resources that we have smartly, because we just can't sustain this.
Yeah, and if the sequestration cuts kick in, there'll be even fewer resources for the military at their disposal. We'll see what happens there. Before we let you go, I also want to talk about the project that you're currently working on at your website, sofrep.com. It's a tribute to heroes of the Special Forces and clandestine services, both of which, as we know, have become incredibly important to domestic security and international security as well. Talk about the goal of your project, and we're going to put up a clip here, and what you hope those of us on the outside of these very elite organizations hope to learn by watching this.
So this project, was dear to my heart. It's about, I've lost a tremendous amount of friends since 9/11, and most recently Glenn Doherty was a close friend and teammate of mine. And really I wanted to get a representative from all branches of special operations, and we had a CIA representative as well, and really just kind of have the American people get a peek behind the curtain and just see how this affects these special people and our ordinary lives, our relationships, and just the tremendous amount of sacrifice that they've made and their families have made since 9/11. And this is part of our online TV channel at SOFREP, and we have a great sponsor in USAA, and they helped us develop this series called Heroes of U.S. Special Operations. And I think when people watch it, they'll see it's something pretty special.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of special forces in the media recently, and you know, it's a long time coming. Most of these folks do this without any hope of ever receiving any kind of recognition by the nature of the job, even though we know they deserve it. Brandon Webb, former Navy SEAL, editor-in-chief at SOFREP.com. We want to thank you so much for spending some time with us. Good to have you back with us, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, John.